Welcome, critters. I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine Critical Role episodes, plot lines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 26, Part 1, and joining me today is Petall.
Hello.
Yes, we took a bit of a break because Claire was losing her mind in October.
I had a very busy October as well. I was grateful for the break.
Yeah, I know Atlas did as well. So I think it was all around. We were just struggle bussing, which is okay.
Yeah.
But we're back. So the icebreaker that I have written down for today is, what's something that you do to de-stress? How topical.
Yeah, I mean, my methods for de-stressing are very extremely topical just in general to this podcast, because it's usually just playing D&D or watching D&D shows. Playing D&D is always great for de-stressing because I'm a very extroverted person, so having that human interaction is really refreshing to me. But then if I'm just like exhausted in general, just like putting on a D&D show, whether it be Critical Role or Dimension 20 or Unprepared Casters or whatever, any other number of shows that I listen to or watch, just like, I don't know, give something for my brain to focus on while I kind of like rest my body. And I can often just kind of like put it on in the background while I do some of my other hobbies and stuff like that. And so yeah, usually that's what I'm doing. It's very D&D related.
I mean, I feel that. I so feel that. Like, when I was thinking about this question, I have short-term de-stress habits and like long-term de-stress habits. And like one of my short-term is dancing and like putting on specifically metal lately.
Nice.
And doing like a little bit of like a head banging, like I think of it as like somatic release, but that's like therapy speak. But that's like the instant way that I use to de-stress. But this is timely because I had a novel release last week, and leading up to it and like going through it and afterwards, one of my go-to kind of like distractions that I called from the stress of everything has been reading romance novels.
Nice.
So I've read about 8 romance novels in the last like week and a half.
That's a lot.
It is, but like you can bang them out in a night. Oh, bang them out in a night. But they're like easy to go through. They don't require a lot of mental effort. Like it's just you know, you get what you expect most of the time with them. And it also, some of the ones that I've been reading lately, I find hilarious in ways that the author did not intend.
Oh, I love it when that happens.
Just to give you a little bit of a taste, there's this one series that I'm reading at the moment called the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, and it's all about these like vampires who are good guys and all of this stuff, and their names absolutely crack me up because their names aren't like John or Bill or anything like that. They're like, I am terror, but it's not like, it's not spelled terror, it's like extra letters in it.
That's so funny.
Like,
I was about to say it was like tiefling virtue names, but it's like trying to hide that it's tiefling virtue names. It'd be better if they just embraced it and it was like, yeah, this is the name, rather than hiding it behind fancy letters.
And they're so like funny. Ancient warrior names. I just die. Like this one guy's name is Vicious, and it's spelled like Viscious. It just has like an extra S. And like, what are some other ones? Oh, there's one guy called Torment, and it has like an extra H.
Oh my gosh.
So serious, they're like, this is my ancient warrior name. I am Rage with an H in the middle of it.
Like at that point, just use the word that you're wanting to name.
Oh, it's so good. So like that's the kind of de-stress. Like I find books like that where they're like hilariously bad. Like, I'm just laughing at how weird that is, more so than taking it seriously. Like, that will get me out of a depression automatically.
Oh yeah. Well, that's why I love watching like Hallmark Christmas movies. I don't
Yes.
watch very many like romantic movies at any other times of the year except for like the occasional rom-com. But like Hallmark Christmas movies, I love to try to cram as many of them as I can into
Yeah.
November and December just because they're so like you know what to expect. They're
Um,
hilarious in ways that they're obviously not intended to be
right.
hilarious.
Yeah.
And it just kind of like, I don't know, adds that warm, cozy feeling of Christmas.
Yeah. 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 Like, I think we need dumb stuff in
Yeah.
just for the hilarity. Like, I laugh to the point of crying sometimes when I'm reading these things because they're so serious and they're like big, brawny men, and they're like, "My name is Terror." So good. All right. Well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As always, we love hearing your own insights and stories, so please comment, like, subscribe below. And ready? All right, let's dive in. So, as we open this episode, Vox Machina have just returned to Greyskull Keep after a very eventful evening following a dinner at the palace in Amon, in which they confronted Lord and Lady Briarwood, the two individuals responsible for the death of Percy's entire family 4 or 5 years prior. They got their asses kicked, absolutely, picked up a new friend, and then brutally fought a group of people who were just trying to fulfill a bounty on their new friend. And now they are settling down to rest, and the next morning comes around. They gather for breakfast, and they notice that both Lilith, their new friend, and Percy have not come down for their meals. Scanlan suggests that maybe Percy needed some female comforting, and Vex denies it, saying he was upset. She asks if they should check on them, and Scanlan says if there is a sock or a ribbon on the door, they should leave them alone. Tiberius asks what they should do next and says that he really wants to see Alora for not particular, well, very specific reasons. They remind them that they need to go to see Sovereign Uriel, and Tiberius says that they need to pick up a new message earring from Alora, which is what he was getting at. Grog rolls for his beard check, but doesn't succeed, still stuck with the half beard after Vex shaved him in a prank. Vex goes upstairs to check on Lilith and finds the room empty with a piece of parchment folded on the bed. It is a message saying thank you for their hospitality, but does not want to endanger them with her presence anymore, so she has left to seek her cousin Zara. Vex relays the message to the rest of the group, and Grog denies it, saying that she must be with Percy getting it on. So he and Scanlan rush up to Percy's room and slam open the door, finding it empty. There are, however, quite a few books and papers tossed around, the possessions in disarray. Scanlan says that Percy is a hoarder and that they must find him in case he is in trouble, so they head down to his basement workshop. The door is closed, but Grog boosts Scanlan up so that he can see into the little eye hole that's on the door. Seeing that Percy is feverishly working inside, Percy calls to them, telling them to leave him be, aka Taliesin is not available at this session. Scanlan asks if he wants a meal brought down, and Percy declines. Scanlan says that maybe next time he can make a bit of a ladder for him to reach the eye hole, and Percy takes a note. Scanlan and Grog return to the group and relay the information. Keyleth says that she's worried about him and Tiberius. Well, him and Tiberius tries to teach Lockheed to follow him, but doesn't succeed. He says everyone's in a mood today, and Vex says that Percy is entitled to his bad mood, obviously. Keyleth asks if anyone else heard what Percy said in the fight the night prior, and Vex says she was a bit distracted by Percy shooting a servant boy in the hand over and over again. Keyleth says that it was after that, actually, and they ask her what he said. She hesitates, not wanting to repeat it, but they press her, and she finally relents as Tiberius leaves to go to his laboratory. Keyleth repeats what Percy said, your soul is now forfeit. Scanlan says that he was just trash talking, and Keyleth says that it was unusually strong and specific, Vex asks if she thinks something's wrong with his pepper box. Scanlan says, well, we all have issues. Keyleth says it was way too specific for that, and Vex says, well, he did lose his entire family to the Briarwoods. And Keyleth says that he didn't scream it at the Briarwoods, though. He screamed it at a random mercenary. Grog says, well, maybe his soul is forfeit. Vex says maybe we should keep an eye on Percy, and Scanlan agrees, saying that he seems to be in a fragile state. Vex says, well, Tiberius did kill an old woman last night. Keyleth says that that's another thing she wants to talk about. It was really intense. She says it was a really hard day, and sometimes they tend to get a bit aggressive, but he didn't just murder an old lady, he chainsawed her, a sleeping, unconscious woman. Grog says it was pretty great. Scanlan asks if they should they should knock it down a notch. Keyleth acknowledges that Scanlan was the only other one who seemed to pull their punches, since he only put the old woman to sleep. Beck says that she did shoot the old lady in the back. She will admit to that. She was aiming for her shoulder, if that makes any difference. Grog says the old woman did have a sweet little run. It was so cute. Scanlan asks if Keyleth is taking moral exception to some of their behavior, and Keyleth says that's exactly what she's saying. She says that that's why she loves Scanlan, because he's so much better at words than her. He says that maybe this is something she can prey on, and they are allies here, so maybe they should consider their actions. Vex says that it's a fair point, but the old woman was trying to kill them. Vex says that the old woman was a fighter, she had a wand. Keyleth says she's not saying that the old woman wasn't a threat, but maybe they shouldn't dissect a woman with a spinning blade who is asleep on the ground. Scanlan says it's constructive criticism, and he, for one, will stop denigrating bodies, just beds. Vax says that he sees what Keyleth is saying, but he doesn't want to cramp Scanlan's style. Scanlan says that he will still shit on things, just not people. Meanwhile, Tiberius does some research on vampirism, finding that it is extremely rare, thought to be abolished about 200 years ago. He also discovers that religious symbology commonly believed to have an effect on vampires actually does not, but finds that sunlight can damage them and prevent them from restoring their health, and ultimately destroy them if brought to the brink of death while in the presence of sunlight. Also, consistently rushing water has a similar effect. A stake in the heart does not destroy them, but does paralyze them, and has to happen while in their coffin. Under all other circumstances, when killed, the vampire returns to mist and returns to their coffin to recover. He returns to the group, and Vax explains that they were just talking about the direction of the group. He says that now that they have at this social status now, friends with the emperor, they need to figure out what they're doing here. Do they want to be powerful badasses who walk about getting what they want, or are we trying to enact some positive change in the world? Tiberius agrees, saying that that's what his items are for, and he's only found one of them. There are countless things to explore, and it is the next step in his quest to find the Ring of Boros in the Feywild. Keyleth asks how he plans to use his items for change, and he says, you see how I use my mending wheel. Grog thanks him for mending his cask. Tiberius says that he's looking to gain the respect of his father and everyone else, that they don't know what it's like to be a chromatic dragon in a metallic world. Vax says that there's no question that he's a valuable member of Vox Machina, and Tiberius says that that's why he has given his loyalty to them. Vex says that the point of all of this is that he killed an old woman last night, quite brutally, and please maybe don't do that again. Tiberius says the old woman felt nothing, but he will oblige, saying that he was just giving his new blade a try. Vex says, yes, well, maybe not on sleeping people anymore, just on people actively attacking them. And Tiberius says, fine, I guess. Vax says that Tiberius's abilities are expanding daily, and maybe he can go into the woods next time and try out his abilities before trying them out on actual people. Tiberius says that if anyone raises a hand to him or Vox Machina, they will die. Grog heartily agrees, and Tiberius says that he doesn't know why this is a discussion, but he won't be as cruel. Keyleth objects, saying that the old woman didn't really do anything to them, and Vex responds that she was attacking them. Vax adds that they all clearly love Keyleth like family, and nobody blames her, but she did once kill a child. Grog asks if it's too early to start drinking and pulls out his cask of ale. Keyleth says, you know, I'm really sensitive about that, Vax, and says that it was an accident. She says that Tiberius's actions were quite deliberate. Vax says that no one agrees with Keyleth more than he does, and he thinks that they can all adjust their perspective slightly. Grog says, what's that word? Scanlan tells him to kill softly in the future, and Tiberius adds, and slowly. Vex reminds them that they should probably be getting to the palace, and Scanlan says, let's stick a pin in this discussion. They'll all be thinking long and hard about this. Vex tells Keyleth that they know that the child's death was not intentional, and Keyleth turns into Minxie. Grog gives her a scratch behind the ears, and Vex asks if they actually have any proof that the Briarwoods are bad. Vax says that he still has the puncture wounds on his neck as evidence, and Seeker Assume should have information to give as well. They leave to head to the palace and make their way into the city. They arrive, and the guards lead them into the throne chamber as Keyleth turns back into her half-elven form, and Vax asks if they have a lost and found. He says he lost his serpent belt, and he's really hoping to get it back. The guard tells him to check back in once they've seen Uriel, and they continue into the throne chamber. They approach Uriel, who is sitting on the throne on a raised dais, and they see Seeker Assume, Alora, and Arbiter Brom step into the rear of the room, as well as 30 guards who enter and block all exits. No weapons are drawn, but there is a strong showing. Uriel stands up and thanks them all for coming. He says he is troubled by recent events and wishes to speak to them before taking any action. Before they left for Vasselheim, Percy in particular expressed interest in the Briarwoods, and he asks where Percy is. They tell him that he's feeling under the weather. Uriel says that upon their return, he invited them to the feast with the Briarwoods, and now he has since been notified that Vox Machina attacked his guests shortly after the meal in their own guest quarters, forcing them to flee, destroying the hallway, and murdering their guards. They then tortured the carriage driver, demanded he be locked in the cell beneath their keep, and when the royal guards returned from delivering the driver, they found a freshly murdered old woman not far from the path Vox Machina had traveled. Not long after, he says, Seeker Assume found Uriel and corroborated most of this unexpected violent behavior. Uriel then asked Arbiter Brom to divine the nature of the murder and found that it was at the hands of Tiberius while the old woman slept. Tiberius confirms it, and Uriel says that he is quite disturbed by these events and would like to hear an explanation. He asks Arbiter Brom to help prepare the space, and Brom steps forward holding a holy symbol of Ioun and casts a spell on the group. Keyleth does a quick insight check on Seeker Assume and rolls a 28, seeing that he is not his normal self, indicating that he may still be under the influence of the Briarwood's mind control spell. Vax steps forward and says, with all respect, I needn't remind you that the group of people before you what they put themselves through on your behalf, on your family's behalf. We almost lost one of our own, and if it counts for nothing, then nothing makes sense. But if that is not enough, let us start here. He then pulls down his collar to show the bite marks on his neck. Tiberius cuts in and says the Briarwoods are vampires, and that old lady, who was a butthole, by the way, his own words, was with this demonoid person that we had to fight as well. Vax stops him and says one thing at a time. Vax explains that they had prior knowledge of the Briarwoods' intentions before this evening, and he went to go spy on them. Vax cuts in. Here's the thing. Percy doesn't like them because they killed his entire family. Grog adds, all of them. Vex continues, the Briarwoods took over his home after killing his family. She says Percy got away and knows they are scary, and Vox Machina is trying to protect Uriel. Tiberius says that they all know how dangerous it is to acknowledge the existence of a vampire and the spreading of those vile creatures. Grog adds, and if you're wondering how we know they're vampires, he turns to Vax and then whispers, Vax, this is your cue. Vax says that he will subject himself to any test that any wizard or mage to look through his eyes and see his memories. Scanlan says that the cleric Tristan also attended to Vax's wounds and can corroborate, oh my god, I hate that word, corroborate their story. He says that he knows this looks really bad on the surface and they do not want to cause any disturbance within these walls, but there was a danger, and they acted, perhaps too abruptly. Vex cuts in, saying that they tried to get his attention as soon as they knew there was danger. Vax says, don't take our word for it. Anyone can look in his head and confirm it. Tiberius interrupts and says, actually, you can take a Stormwind's word for it. Uriel interrupts him and calls for silence. He says, you're in my court now, Stormwind. He continues saying, you put so much weight upon this trust, but I've also heard that you've thrown this trust around in many circles. Amon held a parade in their honor and built them a keep to show their thanks, but Uriel believed that put them square. He owes them nothing, he says, just as they owe him nothing. He says he wants the truth, but he also wants to understand the stakes in question. Uriel is the leader of this entire countryside and has to be sure. This is not the first time he's been lied to by very close, trusted people, so he has to be thorough. Vax says that that's why he puts himself completely under his control and supervision, because he has nothing to hide. Vax says that, in fact, if he is worried about those close to him lying to him, then maybe he should start with Seeker Assume. Keela says that she might be able to help Assume if they would allow her to. Vex says that Assume was mind-controlled last night, but Uriel says that Assume has been by his side for 15 years, far longer than Vox Machina has. Vax interrupts him, raising his voice, and says, Uriel, your own family was not themselves, referring to the trouble that Vox Machina got them out of pre-stream. And Vax demands that they look into his mind now, today. Uriel says that it would do you well to show respect, half-elf. He says that he would assign Allura to such an endeavor, but it has also been noticed that she has grown quite friendly with Vox Machina, and thus there is question to her loyalties. In a few days, there will be an individual assigned to the task. Keyleth tries to interrupt, but he shushes her and continues, saying that the Briarwoods, regardless of what they think they may be, have shown nothing over the past 5 years but graciousness, and have gone through all the proper channels to establish this relationship between Amon and Whitestone, far more than the previous family has ever attempted. Vax cuts in, saying that one may smile and still be a villain. Uriel responds, that goes both ways. Keyleth tries to interrupt again, asking just to do a quick restoration spell on Assume. She says it's harmless. If nothing's wrong with him, then nothing happens. If she is wrong, they can continue with other means of confirming their story. Vex adds that up until last night, Assume was himself. Now he is not. Keyleth says that Assume came to them, and Uriel interrupts, saying that there has been absolutely nothing about Assume's behavior to insinuate any change. However, he will allow this. He calls Assume forward, and Keyleth starts casting Enhanceability on herself as all the guards reach for their weapons. Scanlan does some monk chanting for bardic inspiration and she casts Greater Restoration on Assume. As it finishes, Assume gasps as some sort of realization hits him. His expression does change, and he makes pointed eye contact with Keyleth, almost as if he's trying to silently communicate something to her. She rolls a 29 on her insight check and intuits that Assume is trying to tell her, just go with me on this. He steps back into his place next to the throne and tells Uriel that his stance has not changed. He says it appears that this was either misinformation or hopefully not a lie. Uriel says, all right. As it stands, I fear I must revoke Vox Machina's membership to the Council of Tal'Dorei until further notice. Scanlan says, objection! That's just that. He just wanted to say that. Please continue. I just wanted noted that we strongly object to this. Uriel says he understands, and it will only continue until all of their investigations are complete. Scanlan asks if they are still allowed free reign to roam as they please. Are they under arrest or anything? Uriel says they are not under arrest, just revoked from the council and watched closely until the investigations are complete. Vex asks how long the investigations will take, and Assume says it depends on how quickly they can acquire the information. It could be weeks. Vex asks if they're allowed to leave the city, and Uriel says they can leave if they wish, but if they attempt to flee, they will find them. Vax asks, and when are you to look into my mind? Uriel says that they will speak to the Lyceum to find an individual to do so. Scanlan asks if they are allowed to speak with Allura, and he tells them to do so outside of these chambers. He tells them to do what they must to clear their name. He would like very much for what they're saying to be true, but do not flee or give any indication that they wish to escape this judgment. He would have no choice but to put a bounty on their heads should they not return. Grog laughs at this, and Uriel says that he truly does not wish to do this. Tiberius says, "No need for threats, friend. Are we done here?" Uriel says that he wants to believe them all and asks them to show that his trust has not been misplaced all this time. He then dismisses them, and Scanlan says that he looks forward to the second parade that will be thrown once their names are cleared. Grog turns to the guards and flexes at them before walking away. The guards follow them closely as they exit, and Vax stops one of them asking about his serpent belt again. The guard says that he thinks they have more important matters to worry about than a belt, and Vax responds that he will give 100 gold to anyone who finds it and holds onto it for him. As they stand outside the palace, Scanlan asks what happened with Keyleth's spell, and she explains that Assume gave her a subtle nod. Scanlan says that it must mean they have something to fear from Uriel or someone else close. Keyleth says that she doesn't know who to trust anymore. The spell worked, but it seems like Assume has some sort of long game. Scanlan reminds them that they have a prisoner in the keep and suggests that they go question him to find more proof, but Tiberius says that he really needs to go to Allura. Scanlan says, "We get it, you want her body, but now is not the time." Tiberius says it's beyond that. There are several reasons to go. They need the earring. He needs her to enchant something for him, and he also fears that their keep may be in danger. Maybe she can put up a warding spell. Vex asks if he can bring Allura to the keep. She needs to find out whether this boy is all right first. Keyleth suggests they split up as the palace doors open behind them, and Allura emerges, running up to them. They greet her, and Scanlan asks what the shit just happened in there. Allura says that she doesn't fully know what happened last night and looks at Tiberius, asking that he didn't kill the old woman. Tiberius says, "Of course I did." And Vex adds, "She was attacking us." Scanlan says it looks bad, but she was a threat. And Tiberius tries to explain that she was accompanying a tiefling called the Broker. Allura says that Brahm's divination was very clear, and he saw that the woman was filled with fear, attempting to flee, and unconscious when she was murdered. Vax asks how she could flee if she was unconscious, and Vex confirms that she fled, fell unconscious, then was murdered. Keyleth says, "Just accept it for what it is, guys." Allura says that she just worries. She heard what they said, and she does not trust the Briarwoods either. She felt the odd vibe during the dinner as well, and what they say makes sense. Vampirism is a bit beyond what she was expecting, but she did sense something powerful, very powerful, hidden within Lady Briarwood. She tells them to bring back as much information as they can, and Vax says that he has seen some magic that has defied expectations. Why can no one look into his memory? Allura tells him that not all magics work that way, and there is no one who specializes in that particular kind in Amon. Vax asks if they could use spells to determine whether he is speaking the truth, and Allura informs him that that was attempted in the palace by Arbiter Brahm, who then notified Uriel that many of Vox Machina were resistant to the spell, so the truth could not be verified. Scanlan asks what sort of proof they need to gather, and Allura tells them that if they were to find an item of the Briarwoods, then that would be enough to divine more. Keyleth asks if there's still wreckage left over from the Briarwoods carriage, and Allura says that it has all been disposed. She says there were some remnants left over, however, and they have been investigated but kept under lock and key with Assume. She says she would come to them, but she's working on something else at the moment, then hands over the message earring that Tiberius asked her to make, but seems very disappointed at his recent actions. She requests that they do their best to clear their names and tells them as heroes of the city, there's a lot more on the line for them than their own well-being. Allura makes her leave, and Scanlan starts a discussion on what avenues there are for collecting proof, which then turns into an argument about whether they're even allowed to leave the city. Grog says they don't have to be honest about where exactly they're going, but Tiberius asks that they not lie. They decide to go check on the carriage driver they captured in their dungeon and make their way back to Greyskull Keep while Tiberius runs some errands. They find two individuals waiting for them as they arrive at the keep, an older couple dressed in simple clothes. The man greets them and asks if they are indeed Vox Machina, and Scanlan confirms that they are. The man says they are representatives of the farming community outside the city walls, and the need for meat and crops have been elevated due to the recent influx of troops. They tell them, however, that over the past 2 weeks, a number of their finest cows and sheep have gone missing. There has been no signs of struggle, and they initially suspected thieves, but the neighbor's boy saw a giant bird swooping down and snatching the livestock. Keyleth does a nature check, but hasn't had any personal experience with anything that large. The couple worries that they will be out of livestock soon if it keeps up like this, so they gathered as much money as possible from the surrounding area and decided to approach Vox Machina. Vex tells them to keep their money, much to Grog's surprise, and Vex negotiates that perhaps instead they supply Greyskull Keep with produce and food, to which they happily agree. Scanlan says they are not yet promising to take care of their problems since they have other pressing matters at the moment, and ask if they have a deadline for this. They say as soon as possible would be preferred since they are losing their livestock every night that passes. So Scanlan asks if they could talk it over a bit and get back to them. They agree and give them directions to their farmstead close to the northern city walls. Grog asks if it has ever come during the day and is told that they only come at night, to which Grog nods sagely and says it's a vampire bird. Keyleth reassures the couple that they will come by their farm soon, and Scanlan gives them his business card. They take their leave, and as they head into the keep, Vex reminds them that they are really in danger of being ostracized and should really be nice to everyone right now. Scanlan calls to the guard on duty, Cordell, and says, "Remember when I told you not to let people linger outside of our keep?" To which Cordell responds that the couple is well known to the community and he figured it was something they would want to hear. Scanlan gives him some shit, but Keyleth and Vex insist that they're here to help people. Meanwhile, Tiberius heads to the Alabaster Lyceum and tries to research sigils that may lead to the Feywild, but discovers that sigils of transportation or teleportation require the same plane of existence. So instead, he looks for a sigil to Westruun since he remembers that there may be a door to the Feywild near there, using his favor to get access to the sigil. And that's where they break for the episode. So, what do we think of this first half?
I think it sounds like there are some major consequences for specifically Tiberius's actions.
Here comes a consequence.
And so I mean, this episode is called Consequences and Cows. So
yeah.
First half we'll talk about consequences. Next episode we'll talk about cows.
I mean, this is another episode that goes into the canon. This is a canonical episode for sure. It gets referenced years and years and years down the road.
Yeah. But gosh, it was physically painful to watch just Tiberius dig himself deeper and deeper into that hole. Because the problem with it wasn't a problem attacking the old lady. The problem was killing her while she was unconscious, which is what the role Tiberius played in all of that. And just the fact that while even though the rest of Vox Machina was oh no, we shouldn't have done that, Tiberius almost seems proud of it in the way that he keeps saying oh yes, it was me who did that, and just and it's just gosh, and just knowing that the second half gets even worse, that this is his last episode. It was painful to watch the first time around when I first watched this episode, and it was painful to watch again for this podcast.
It's pretty cringe. And I think we're seeing a perfect example of what someone can do in a situation where they feel trapped
Yeah.
or suppressed, I think is a good term to use.
Yeah.
Because there has been a more concentrated effort, I think, from Matt to throw obstacles in Tiberius's way.
Yes.
To maybe help him navigate the nuances of sorcery a little bit more. Because I think Orion as a player just doesn't have enough of a grasp on game mechanics to grasp those nuances. Like, they have, up until this point in all of these episodes, spent a significant amount of time teaching Orion the game.
Yes.
Which we also see with people like Laura. You know, we're also kind of teaching her the game as the campaign goes on as well. But Orion has shown time and time again a little bit of a resistance to learning these nuances, right?
Yeah. There's a difference between like teaching someone the game of D&D, because they have people on all the time who are playing D&D for the first time, and like even the people who have been at the table for like all of these years sometimes still forget mechanics and get like reminded and all of these things, because there's a lot to learn. There's a complex game, but there's a difference between that and like being like willing to learn and accept that. And then the way that Orion has been playing up until this point, where we've talked about it in so many episodes, like trying to be the main character, like cheating and using more sorcery points than he actually has, and like just overall showing a complete disregard for anyone, whether it be PC or NPC, who is not him and who is not furthering his own interests. And it's when those players come to the table that it becomes a problem, because like a big part of D&D is like, yes, you are telling a story and you get to be a character who is part of something far bigger than themselves, but you're also not the only person doing that. There's a whole party and you have to take the party into account. And if you try to act like you're the main character, or that like you're the only important one, then that's when it.
Yeah. And so I think that Matt doing the feeble mind spell for Tiberius during the Briarwood fight was an attempt from Matt to help him learn these nuances. Because you aren't entirely defenseless when you are feeble-minded. You still have your physical capabilities, but Orion wasn't even willing to explore those. You know, what he did have limited access to, he chose not to even use during that fight, which I think is why he was so vicious in the fight with the broker and the old lady. Because he was suppressed during the Briarwood fight and then was finally unleashed upon this unsuspecting broker and old lady. And there's a way to react to those types of limitations as a player in a non-combative way. Like,
absolutely,
there's a great analogy that I've been thinking of with my own D&D group that I run. So recently they were kidnapped by pirates and kept in cages on a pirate ship. And so they were stripped of all of their items. You know, all of, like, my alchemist had no access to all of her potions and potion making things. My necromancer didn't have access to any of her components. You know, those are things that severely limit what they're able to do. And like, I had also given them a silent spell, and so they couldn't use like verbal components either in any of their spells. And so that was me as a DM showing them that they do have these other options available to them, and they have to like pay attention to those nuances of spells, like verbal versus somatic versus material, you know, like all of those different things that you can use creatively. Like, it's not like I'm limiting you to punish you. I'm encouraging you to use those limitations creatively. And so, like, for example, my necromancer, for one of her spells, she needed a pinch of iron in order to cast it. Like, that was her material component for it. And so while she was chained in this cage on this pirate ship, she was like, if I rub the chains together, can I get enough of a pinch of iron to cast the spell? And I was like, that's exactly what I want you to be thinking about. Because that's how you're creative with those limitations. So then they're more nuanced later on once they do get access to their components, once they do get access to, like, my alchemist was pissed because she couldn't do jack shit without her alchemy supplies. She was like, I am weak, I am useless, and I'm not doing anything. But that's the difference between like Orion's response to these limitations versus like in my own D&D game and my players' responses to those types of limitations.
Well, absolutely. And we even see those differences like in Critical Role. This is not the first time that Matt puts these challenges in place that like kind of cause these players to think outside of the box. But like, yeah, and like everybody else reacts like they find it exciting to like find something new. Like it's exciting, it's a fun challenge, everybody enjoys that. I know that when I play D&D, I enjoy when like my character faces challenges or when things don't always go my character's way, which is why it's like so starkly stands out when Orion and Tiberius push back so much anytime there's any resistance.
Well, there's a lot of frustration in this first half. Like, Keyleth is very frustrated. Tiberius has been frustrated and is now facing the consequences for his frustration. But also Vax is very frustrated in this first half. He keeps asking, like, why can't you read my mind? Why can't you read my mind? Like, over and over. Like, he's asked it at least 10 times now, you know? And definitely seeing the different character responses to frustration.
Yeah. And that's another thing too. There's a very stark difference between like the characters being frustrated and like maybe like the players pouring some of their frustration into that versus like the players being like frustrated and like not the players. I got mixed up players, characters, all then like the players, because it seems a lot of the times, like especially like later on, like the Critical Role cast will like really play into their characters' frustrations, even if like they themselves aren't frustrated, and that's just good storytelling. Whereas on the other hand, like Tiberius is basically a vehicle for Orion's frustration, and he's not thinking about character implications at all. He's not thinking about any of that. He's just thinking about his own frustration and his own like feelings that he's like being like punished. And like in a way he is, like Matt is very kindly trying to like, without turning it into a big whole like player to player scene, trying to like gently direct into a good direction. And it doesn't work.
It's just becoming more and more obvious, the conflict between the players in this. And it definitely blows up in the second
Absolutely.
The player conflict. Oh, it's so cringe.
Oh yeah. No, I'm not. I mean, like, it'll be good to talk about, but I'm not looking forward to watching the second half of this episode because I know it just gets 1,000 times worse.
But we're not going to talk about that just yet. But,
no, that's next episode.
That's a problem for future Claire and Flat.
Yes.
What personal experiences come to mind for us in the first half here?
One personal experience that's coming to mind is that, I mean, I've talked a little bit in some previous episodes about some tension that I have had with some coworkers at work. And there has been, not for the specific coworker that I was talking about, but for a different one. It was a similar thing to Orion, basically, where I had this one coworker who was really trying to control the workplace and like stir up drama to like make everything go her way, and it just like really made the whole like atmosphere of everything in the workplace be weird. And like most people, until she was gone, because eventually her drama stirring and all of this
Mhm.
caught up to her, and she like was asked to leave. Like nobody could really identify until after that she had left that she had been like the core of all that. But it just kind of,
Mhm.
it reminds me, it's a similar thing, similar frustration about things not going her way, similar wanting to be the most important person there,
Mhm.
to the detriment of everybody else, which sucks because we work with youth who
Mhm.
are most of which are like homeless or in very difficult situations, and they don't deserve to be used as pawns in a
Mhm.
staff member's game who's supposed to be looking out for them. And
Mhm.
so I don't know, that's what comes to mind with this. It's just like similar cores to
Yeah.
both of these people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's almost sad. Like that's what I was thinking while you were talking through it. Like I almost feel pity for people like that
Mm-hmm.
because it's obviously they need that attention in order to feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a tricky subject too when you are making knee-jerk decisions. Like
Mm-hmm.
this happens very much in the world of D&D, but also like in workplace scenarios and family scenarios and
Mm-hmm.
friendships. Like when you make these knee-jerk decisions that are based on that insecurity inside
Yeah.
yourself, then you have to deal with the consequences down the road. But it's so easy to make the insecure decisions in the moment.
Yeah.
Like if Tiberius or even like Vax had that moment to think before acting. Like Vax assumed that there would be a hallway before getting to the guest rooms of the Briarwood.
Yeah.
And so he assumed he could like sneak in and sneak out easily. But
Yeah.
he had to make that knee-jerk decision to go through with that, and that is a weakness of his character decision making skills, right? And I think it's the same with Tiberius of he made this knee-jerk reaction of like, well, I was suppressed and so now I'm going to go hard in the paint and murder this old woman. Like if he had thought about that before, I almost feel like Matt set up that fight in order to trip them up,
Yeah.
you know? So like I see this happen all the time in day-to-day life of people making those knee-jerk reaction decisions in the moment. Like as you were talking, I was thinking about an ex that I once had that would come home from work completely amped up, like frustrated about something, annoyed about something at work. Like, I don't know what happened exactly, but something happened. And then he would like take it out on me, and just like pick on really random things to get mad about in the house. And I'm like, this
Mm-hmm.
isn't honestly worth the amount of frustration you're putting into it right now.
Yeah.
Like, it is so much dramatic than you're making it to be in this moment. Like how I unload the dishwasher is not that important a long time,
No.
but you're choosing that minor thing as almost like the scapegoat in the situation.
Yeah.
I think maybe the old woman is Tiberius's scapegoat,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
but it's those knee-jerk emotional reactions that I think that get us in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But you
Absolutely. And there are times when you have nothing but knee-jerk reactions that
yeah,
you can make. I think
yeah.
it also depends how you respond after those knee-jerk reactions, and whether whether those knee-jerk reactions, like the same ones, become patterns, or whether you learn from it and make different choices next
Mhm.
time. Because
Mhm.
everybody makes bad decisions, everybody makes mistakes, nobody is 100% perfect.
Absolutely.
Everybody has instances where they either intentionally or by accident hurt other people. What matters is what you do after that and how that impacts your future and your future
Yeah.
actions.
Yeah. Which Tiberius is obviously not doing.
No, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, because I think Vax, once he was like legitimately told that like, no, we don't have those magics available, then he was like, oh, okay. Well, what about a truth spell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. Well, what about this? Oh, okay. Well, what about that? Like
Hmm.
then there was a plan B, plan C, plan D.
Yeah.
Not like plan A or nothing.
Exactly. And it seemed very much, again, like it was Liam, like maybe there was some frustration on Liam for the blame being put on, but a lot of it was just like being like Vax is a very like rational person. Like these are ideas. He's like a very honest person for the most part. And he's like, I'm telling the truth. How can I make you see this and show you that I'm telling the truth? And
Yeah.
it was like going through these different options. And it was like once he heard why those options weren't possible, it was like,
Mhm.
okay, let's move on. And it seemed more of a character thing. Whereas like I was saying with Tiberius, it seemed more of a player thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we know how that ends up, but
We
we'll
sure do.
we'll get there. We'll get there. So
We sure will.
what are we being called to do here as a result?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the situation with my former coworker. The coworker's now a formal coworker. There's nothing I can do with that. Thankfully, that situation is over. And surprisingly, it made all of the situations with my other coworkers so much easier because guess what?
Oh,
She was feeding into that.
what a
But
concept.
I think it just like reminds me how, like, as I mentioned before, everybody is capable of making these bad knee-jerk reactions. It happens to everybody, and to just like keep watch, like not be so like certain of myself that I won't ever make these bad choices, and just keep an eye out for them so that when I do inevitably make bad choices like that, I learn from them and are better in the future and they don't become these patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a specific practice that I've had to adopt over the years is like not to answer emails when I'm angry. And that's
Fair.
still something I have to practice, honestly. Like, I'm not great at it so far, but like, because I have a habit of one of my communications, especially when I'm in the middle of the workday, is very direct to the point. Like, I don't spend a lot of time on like fluff, like, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
How's your dog? Da, da, da. Like, I'm just like, this is it, moving on. And
Mm-hmm.
it can sometimes come off as argumentative. It can sometimes come off as, just negative. And
Yeah.
um, I've had to really make a conscious effort over the years to be like, okay, so I need to step back from like either A, treating this as just like a directive as is statement versus like what is the emotion that they're also looking for here. Like some people want reassurance, some people want the softer answer to these things, and being aware of how my emotional state is coming through and affecting the other person's emotional state is one of
Yeah.
the things that I have to be on my guard for a lot of the time, and not answer those emails with the same energy, especially if it's an
Mm-hmm.
angry email of being like, well, you did this and you did that and like, no, it's like, all right, well, here's the deal. This is what happened. Like it's definitely you need some space in order to
Yeah.
process that so that you don't make those knee-jerk statements that can cause more issues.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, like not sending emails when I'm mad, when I'm tired, when I'm frustrated with anything, like, because you don't know what the other person's going through either. That's the
No.
other thing, is like,
And with emails, you can't pick up on like actual tone. It's very much
yeah,
like based on how the other person interprets it.
yeah, like sometimes I've even have to follow up and be like, I realized that my last email was like a 2-sentence answer and you wanted like a paragraph, and this is the paragraph explanation behind 2 sentences that I sent you.
Uh-huh.
so that you understand the context of those two sentences.
Yeah.
Because for me, I was just giving you the answer and moving on with my life, whereas you were asking for a different reason, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's still a practice that I have to do. Like, and I'm not entirely great at it, but we all try our best.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing where I had to learn not to make TikToks when I was feeling spiteful either. And not to create like social media content when I'm feeling spiteful either. Because that shit is out there. And like,
and that's just how that whole like cancel culture, call out culture kind of like, it's so like, I've seen it so many times where somebody has made a thing, like made a post about a personal issue, and then it turns into like somebody's like internet life being ruined because nobody trusts them just because of somebody having a bad day, and maybe they were genuinely hurt by that person, but not to the point where they deserve to like become a internet outcast.
Yeah, you gotta be careful. You really gotta be careful, because people are watching nowadays. Like, it's gonna get out there. So well, anything you want to add before you wrap up?
I can't think of anything.
I was just thinking about what it would be like if Vox Machina had social media profiles.
That would be interesting. I'm sure there's lots of people who have done up like social media profiles for them and then posted them on the internet.
Be a Redditor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, that's so good. I think Vex would be on Instagram.
Yeah, that's what I was picturing.
Scanlan would totally be on TikTok.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I feel like
go ahead.
I was gonna say I feel like Vax would have a Tumblr.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I feel like Grog would have one of those like construction cell phones, the ones that are like so thick and unbreakable that like really like throw them in concrete and they'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, these are powerful themes and also funny themes we're talking about here.
We need that lighthearted bit for dealing with this particular episode.
Man, I always think of that one Gilmore Girls meme where Sookie is saying like, am I laughing or am I crying? Because I don't know right now. And I'm like, I think about that nearly every day.
Yeah.
Am I laughing or am I crying? Because it could be either at this moment.
Yeah.
Audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and stories and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has impacted you in your own lives. And special thanks to Petall for joining me on this episode. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
So next time we'll be talking about Campaign 1, Episode 26, Part 2, the cringe-worthy episode. And joining me again will be Petall, so I'm super excited for that. As always, I'm looking for more co-hosts and guests, so if you're interested in coming on this series and sharing your perspectives, please reach out to me. I'd love to have you. And in the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below. Check us out on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR for all the juicy updates. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and be the chaotic good you wish to see in the world. Take care, yours.